Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be checking out another documentary style video. This one's going to be The Children Who Built Victorian England. This one is a priority request by Bunny J, so shout out to you, Bunny J. And if you want to make a priority request yourself, there's links in the description down below, along with the links to the original video, which happens to be by the channel called Economia Eracaslia. So there you have it. Make sure you go over there to the original channel, show them some love, hit like on their original video, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it and check out the children who built Victoria, England, right here on the coolest reaction channel on planet Earth. Let's do it.
I live partly with my father and grandmother and partly in the workhouse. When I was 9, I was then bound apprentice to a man who turned me over to the colliers. My father said to him, "I'd rather you tied a stone around his neck and drowned him."
Well, that's not cool. You messed up, huh? Dang. 1820, 40% of the population. We're under 15. 40%, holy crap. Most were sent to work. These are their words, stories, and voices. These are the children of the revolution. Sorry, I'm not a singer. Wow! Very low quality video though, yeah. Although it's shrunk down a little bit for you guys, so it should look a little better.
Three great golden men.
Golden men.
Surveying their plans for the future. Matthew Bolton, William Murdoch, and James Watt.
Okay.
All key figures in Britain's Industrial Revolution. This statue casts them as minor deities, lording it over their domain, and stands here in the centre of Birmingham, a city that benefited greatly from their combined genius. There are monuments like this all over the country, because when it comes to the Industrial Revolution, we all know who should get the credit. It's the money men, the manufacturers, the inventors, the engineers, the great and the good, men like these. But these 18th and 19th century entrepreneurs and inventors were only able to capitalize on their brilliance thanks to one all-important resource, the raw material found in plentiful supply. It was children. Of course, there's no memorial to their contribution. But the children of the revolution fortunately have left us something much more important than stone and gold paint. They've left us their own stories in their own voices, and they can still speak up for themselves down across the centuries.
All right. This is going to be an interesting documentary. I can already tell it's going to be pretty sweet. It's got Metallica in there. You know, it's a little bit upbeat. It's not going to be long and drawn out, I don't think. So, yeah. Let's check it out. Charles Bacon, age 13 years, born Leicestershire, 1871.
Standing by my father, with a knot of whipcord in my buttonhole, which showed that I had a desire to work with horses, I stood there, waiting for the highest bidder for my services. Before I'd left home, I'd read Uncle Tom's Cabin. And when I saw us all lined up, I remember thinking it was much the same in England as it was in America, bar the whip.
They called them the white slaves of England. What we just heard were the words of Charles Bacon, hired off in the 1870s. I'm Professor of Economic History at Oxford University and a Fellow of All Souls College. And for the last 5 years, I've been searching for and studying lost testimonies by the child workers of the Industrial Revolution.
Interesting.
The children of the Industrial Revolution were the first generation of ordinary working-class British kids to have their thoughts and experiences thoroughly documented. Their stories are preserved in diaries, letters, and in published and unpublished autobiographies. We also have government reports, parish records, and early newspaper interviews. But outside of academia, few people know these documents exist or appreciate how vast this treasure trove of hidden voices really is.
Now, did they just not have anything like prior to that, I wonder? Or like, because it said it was the first generation that was documented, right? Like, or is it just because it was at the start of the Industrial Revolution? It was first when it first happened? I don't know.
I began to read and research these eyewitness accounts of life in the age of manufactures as a way of looking at child labour today in the developing world.
Child labor laws, I'm assuming, are a hell of a lot better today than they were back then. I mean, I'm just going to take a long shot and say that. But
It's a sobering thought that the
I mean, maybe not in countries like whatever this picture is from, but, you know, in modern developed nations, the labor laws would certainly be better than Victorian Britain, I would 100% assume.
To the Mumbai slum dogs of the mudlarks and gutter snipes of 18th and 19th century London. But the more I read these children's stories, the more it taught me about the lives of those people who are great-great-great-great-grandparents. We always see them as victims, drudgers and drones, but it's not the whole story.
I actually have ancestry in England, like Northumberland, England, way in the top right hand section of England, actually. Way back in, I don't even remember like how far back it was traced back to. It's pretty cool.
The children's relationship to the world of work was complex. Their employment helped build up Britain's industrial power, but it also contributed to our modern notions of childhood. Mind you, there were many amongst that first generation who signed up for work without really knowing what they were letting themselves in for.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Robert Blinko, born London, 1792. Pauper at St. Pancras Workhouse. Now, if I'm butchering these names, I apologize. I'm not good at pronunciation. So, yes. Oh, here's the workhouse. Oh, that's cool. Little animation.
An agreement between the overseers of a workhouse and the owner of a great cotton mill. The children were told that when they arrived at the cotton mill, that they would be transformed into ladies and gentlemen. That they would be fed on roast beef and plum pudding and have plenty of cash in their pockets. In August 1799, 80 boys and girls who were 7 years old became parish apprentices till they had acquired the age of 21. The young strangers were conducted into a spacious room with long narrow tables and wooden benches. The supper set before them consisted of milk porridge of a very blue complexion. Where was our roast beef and plum pudding?
Where was our roast beef and plum pudding? Good question. They were lied to.
That was the con played on 8-year-old Robert Blinko, was told to a journalist several years later. He was bound apprentice to a spinning mill like this one. This is Quarrybank Mill in Cheshire, founded in 1780.
1780? Or 18?
Founded in 1780.
I think 80, 1780.
It was built out in the sticks because it needed the river that runs through the valley to power the machines inside. The downside of that decision was that remote places like this were low on available manpower. So who would staff these mills? Who would do the work? The solution was to recruit the most vulnerable elements in society. Orphans. The first wave of factory labour in this country was made up of orphans.
Orphans, huh? First wave.
They were the real-life Oliver Twists, left to the mercy of the parishes. And their employment was nothing less than state-sponsored slavery. They were called parish apprentices, and aged as young as 7 or 8, were taken by cart from their homes in the parishes of London and other towns and cities and transported hundreds of miles away to places like this.
Uh-oh.
On arrival, they would be piled into dormitories like this one, billeted near their workplaces and indentured to the mills and factories as apprentices. Once signed over, they had to stay here till they were 21, sometimes 24 years old.
Dang.
This is the girls' dormitory. It's bigger than the boys' dormitory next door. Looks a little bit primitive, doesn't it? However, inside the factories, things were far from basic. State-of-the-art machinery shook and pounded the walls of these mills.
Well, yeah, it's their bread and butter, you know what I mean? It's the Industrial Revolution, so, I mean, they want to get, you know, they got those machines top-notch, they want to make sure they're running, they don't give a shit about their workers or nothing, they just want to make sure their machines are running so they can make that money.
From dawn till dusk, and all the while children kept time with the relentless beat.
So, Chris, how many people would be working this machine?
Typically, 2 men and a young child to a pair. The machine that we have here represents only half of that pair.
Yes. Was it dangerous?
Oh, yeah. Injuries generally always occurred in the last 2 hours of the day.
So, injuries happen when people lost concentration.
I start getting tired.
See, over here in this picture, the boy's not wearing any shoes.
No, you weren't allowed to wear your clogs, which were that footwear of that period, you weren't allowed to wear them simply because with these machines running all the time, you get a level of cotton dust that builds up on the floor almost as if it's been snowing.
Yeah.
And obviously with your clogs, if your clog iron was to catch the railing on the floor, possibility of a spark, and you would set fire to the factory floor. You'd burn the mill down. So mule room work was always barefooted.
Yeah. I heard that there was a fatality associated with this machine in the past.
Yes, there was. A 13-year-old boy. It was one of the most important tasks that he was involved in was that of wiping down. The men who were in charge of these machines would draw the carriages out onto the end of the railings and then applying a brake to prevent the carriage retracting. The children then had to go around the back of the mule and then they would crawl underneath on the hands and knees, and on this occasion the guy who was in charge of this particular mule took his brake off and commanded the child to get out, and the child either didn't hear him or he didn't get out in time, and consequently he was crushed to the roller beam and killed instantly.
Terrible.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm sure that there was a lot of, I mean, it was just a sad time in general, but I'm sure that there was a ton of just bad casualties in general. So, yeah, man. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting. I didn't necessarily know, you know, I don't really know much about Victorian Britain. So this is going to be awesome. We're going to learn together. Because, you know, a lot of you guys might not know either, so.
Parish apprentices were often called pauper apprentices because the new factories provided the powers that be with a cheap way of dealing with poor children. Work became a substitute for social welfare. Katrina Honeyman is a history professor at Leeds University and an expert on parish apprentices. Our image of child labour is almost entirely negative. Does that really cover the experience of the pauper apprentices in this time period?
Many children went off to their apprenticeship, whether it was factory or elsewhere, quite excited at the possibility of becoming, you know, an independent worker, learning a skill.
Yeah, at first. Then they got there and realized that there wasn't no pumpernickel bread.
They had regular meals, even if they weren't great.
Yes.
They got education, you know, and they had a roof over their heads. But right from the start, they would be working 14 or 15 hours a day, sometimes more, with the possibility of overtime.
Overtime? 14, 15 hours a day, you're already on overtime. I mean,
a little money. Otherwise, they weren't paid.
This free labour was integral
Crazy.
to the rise of the new industries. Managers didn't want adults who were used to less regimented ways of working. Children could be made to adapt. Not only that, but many machines were designed to be operated by small children with their nimble fingers. Can we see these children as pivotal to the emergence of this new form of enterprise?
It's difficult to see how the industry could have expanded in the way that it did without the quantity and the nature of the child labour that was available.
it's crazy how things work like that, though, ain't it, guys? Like, I mean, it's sad that it happened like that, but if it didn't happen like that, the world wouldn't be as advanced and modern as it is. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. Sarah Carpenter, age 9, born Bristol, sent to work in Derby, 1849.
The master carter's name was Thomas Burks. Tom the Devil, we called him. He was a very bad man. Everybody
Tom the
was
Devil.
frightened of him. He once fell poorly, and very glad we were. We wished he might die. We were always locked up out of mill hours, for fear any of us should run away. One day, the door was left open. Charlotte Smith said she would be ringleader if the rest of us would follow. She went out, but no one followed her. The master found out. There was a carving knife which he took, and grasping her hair, he cut it off close to the head. This head shaving was a dreadful punishment. We were more afraid of it than any other. The girls are proud of their hair.
Dang. Yeah, I mean, it's more than just taking the hair off. Like, that's like, that's your image, you know? That's like your pride, like your self-esteem. They're just stripping you from all of it, man. That's nuts.
Rural and picturesque, this place seems a world away from scary urban factories, but Quarry Bank had its runaways too. In 1856, a girl called Esther Price was caught escaping. She was sent up here to the punishment room in the attic of the house. Here it is, this is the punishment room.
Punishment room, huh?
The windows would be blacked out. Her bed, it's a blanket on the floorboards. She got supper and breakfast, but was locked away here for a whole week on her own. Poor little
Sad.
mite. As an added and coincidental cruelty, as she was taken up here, she had to pass by the corpse of an adult who had died earlier that day and was laid out in the attic for collection.
Dang.
Alone in the dark, stomach empty, a corpse for company. No wonder she wanted to run away.
Well, yeah. Who's trying to stick around for
The
that?
siphoning off of poor and orphan children from state care was not going to sustain the huge industrial expansion that Britain was experiencing. The country needed lots and lots of cheap labour. So the order came from the very top: use the children. During the war with
From the
revolutionary
top,
France,
huh?
Prime Minister William Pitt was warned that British manufacturers were unable to pay their taxes. They blamed high wages. With 1 in 10 men away fighting, able adult workers came at a premium and cut into profits. Pitt's advice was
Okay,
short
deal
and
with it.
simple. He is Luckily for Pitt and for Great Britain plc, for the first time in its history, the country was awash with children. In the mid-1700s, the population of Britain was small and stationary, around 5.7 million. But by the end of the century, it had shot up by more than 50% to 8.7 million. So, what changed? The answer's in here.
Everybody started getting frisky.
This is St Michael's in Madeley, Shropshire, built by that great man of the industrial age, Thomas Telford, in 1796.
It's a good song in the background.
There's been a church on this site since Norman times, and the marriage registers are long and very well maintained.
Oh, they got the records all the way back.
These are beautiful records. You can see here somebody's not been able to sign their name, so they've put their mark, and elsewhere they've struggled to write their signatures. Now, study of these and other records have shown that as the 18th century progressed, more people were marrying younger. Now, why was that? Previously, men and women were employed to work the land and lived in with their employer, usually a farmer or a big local landowner. These men liked to keep their young employees single because married employees had children and were more of a burden. But advances in farming practice meant less people were needed to grow food, so fewer people lived in and more were kicked out. Of course, that meant that there was no master to ask for permission to wed.
Okay.
These liberated workers began travelling, earning their wages in new industries. The pay wasn't great, but it wasn't based on the sliding scales of farm work. They reached their peak potential earnings at younger ages and so attempted to marry and start families sooner. Women with jobs found their earnings could shore up new families, adding again to the temptation to marry younger. As for those women who couldn't find work, well, they were eager to marry young and gain financial protection. The result, in the early 1700s, the average age of British brides had been nearly 27. By 1800, it had fallen to 23 and a half. Those 3 additional years of married life were crucial. Girls were at their most fertile and could produce 2 additional babies.
An extra 2 babies? Uh-oh.
So at the very moment that Britain was prepared to take the giant technological leap into the machine age, it had its largest, youngest population. And it was a mobile population, able to adapt to change. Everything was tailored towards delivering the industrial future.
Obviously, nobody cared about the kids.
The industrial future needed feeding, and children played a role in that too. We tend to think of children from this time as working in mines and factories, but in fact, child labour was ubiquitous. Almost every workplace would have had children in it, and the biggest employer was actually agriculture. Agriculture accounted for about 1/3 of children's jobs, often on small setups like this one. This farm was attached to the local rectory and worked by a small team, including boys and girls.
Wonder what a rectory is. Local rectory?
Of course, agriculture is one area where we still see children working today, ushered into the life of the farm under the watchful eye of their parents.
Yeah.
Children of the Industrial Revolution rarely enjoyed such a gentle introduction. Unlike the factory apprentices, child farm workers were often the only children employed on an establishment. And they were also housed with their master or another adult worker, and there was no one looking over the shoulders of these men to see how they were treating their child employees. As a result, these children were often more vulnerable than the children who worked in factories. For example, men's reminiscences tiptoe around the topic of child sexual abuse. But in the testimonies I've read, there are 2 cases where boys were probably molested. And both involved lonely little farm workers consigned to the care of other adults, far from the protection of friends and family. Just like the heavy industries, agriculture had a job for every age group. And the entry level into farm work began at 6 years old, when children could be employed as human scarecrows.
Human scarecrows. Okay. Let's find out about that one. Human scarecrows, where they just run around and just scare all the damn birds away from the crops, and that was their job. William Arnold, born Northampton, 1860. First employed at 6 years old.
When I was 6 and 2 months old, I was sent off to work. I do not think I shall ever forget those long, hungry days in the field scaring crows. You can imagine the feeling of loneliness.
Oh,
Hours
yeah.
and hours passed without a living creature coming near. I cried most of the time. And in desperation, I would shout as loud as I could, "Mother! Mother! Mother!" But Mother could not hear. She was working in a hayfield 2 miles away. By my 7th birthday, I was driving a plough. Any repairs to plough or harness had to be taken to tradesmen. Once, after working all day long, I had to carry a plough horse collar that required whistling, and the plough coulter that needed repairs at the blacksmith.
Plow culture.
These 2 heavy things made a
Oh, that's like the thing that the big ring thing that goes around the neck, it looks like? I don't know. The video's kind of dark and fuzzy, so it's hard to tell.
burden far too much for me, but I had to trudge with them as best I could the 1.5 miles across the fields to Everton.
William Arnold was just 6 years old when he went to work on that farm in Northamptonshire. And this is a horse collar like the one he carried. Let me show you just how heavy this is. Oof.
Yeah, it is those ring-looking things.
And now we need the coulter, because he also carried that.
Coulter?
This is part of the plough.
Oh, that's the coulter. I don't know what that part is.
40 pounds. That probably weighs more than he did.
Dang, for a little kid, 40 pounds, that's a lot.
In many ways, the crow scarers and the children fetching and carrying for farm labourers were on the lowest rung of the employment ladder. But many testimonies tell us that even at that level and at a young age, the children saw these punishing labours as an opportunity. They were proper workers and they wanted to get on.
At 6 years old, though? I mean, come on. They don't even know what... I mean, I guess maybe if they starved their whole life, it just seems... I don't know. I mean, this is, I guess, 200 years ago, 100 years... No, yeah, 200 years ago. So it's like, I guess, it is a bit of a different time period. So, but it just seems like a 6-year-old at that point wouldn't care or wouldn't want to do that or be like, oh, yeah, the opportunities. Like, they just want to go outside and play or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Anyways, we got Joseph Ark, born Barford, Worcestershire, 1826. A likely lad.
In our village, there was a wealthy banker and justice of the peace. I began to drive a pair of horses at plough for him, and after a bit, thinking, I suppose, that I was a smart, likely lad, he made me a sort of stable boy and gave me 8 shillings a week to start with.
It might have been a lot back
It was
then.
a
I
rise
don't
for a
even know.
lad who was set on rising as fast and as much as he could. There were no slack half hours for me, no taking it easy with the other lads.
Nope. Can't be slacking.
To make more money, to do more, to know more, to be a somebody in my little world was my ambition.
Hey, I mean, big dreams. Big goals. I want to go somewhere too in life.
They might not have had much choice about their employment, but many children were determined to seize what opportunities came along with a level of determination and enthusiasm that's astonishing, if sometimes hard to imagine. For some jobs really did require huge amounts of courage.
Oh, I'm sure. George Elson, born Northampton, 1860, 10-year-old. He's a climbing boy. That's what it says.
With a view of immediately testing my capabilities, my new master persuaded me to climb a chimney on my very first morning. With the feet standing up on the grate, the body would nearly fill up the width of a chimney. I climbed, with my right arm lifted above the head, the left down by my side.
So I'm assuming he's a chimney sweep or something, right? Chimney climber, climbs up in there and cleans out the chimneys and gets all that soot out. Kind of like on Mary Poppins.
The elbows were pressed hard against the brickwork to hold the body suspended until the knees were drawn up. Then the knees on one side and the bare heels on the other held me secure, while the right hand plied the scraper to bring down the soot. The knees and elbows, through the constant pressing and the friction with the brickwork, became peeled, thus allowing soot to penetrate. It caused ugly, festering sores, which took several weeks to heal. Breathing was always more or less a difficulty. A hood, called a climbing cap, was drawn over the head and tucked in at the neck. But even with that protection, I was subject to the taste and inhalation of every kind of soot into my throat and lungs.
Wow. And that's not good for you either. You get like, you end up getting like black lung or something from it. Man, life expectancy had to have been quite low. That's probably why it was like, what, 40% of the population was under 15 or something, it said?
Fires had only just been put out. The sulphurous fumes were sufficient to stifle one.
Man.
Once the fumes were so strong that I fell from top to bottom, nigh insensible.
That's crazy. Not Mary Poppins. Or wait, is it Mary Poppins? No, there's another one too. I can't remember it. But yeah, this song, it might be off the Mary Poppins one. I don't remember for sure.
Yes, they really did put kids up chimneys.
It's crazy.
And this is a kind of normal chimney.
But I mean, in all fairness, kids do fit in there easier, I'm sure. I mean, I'm just saying.
That George Elson would have been dealing with. But that one's so wide that he would have had no challenge from that. He'd have been up and down there like grease lightning. What
like
really
grease lightning.
tested boys' metals were chimneys that measured 9 inches by 9 inches, which is this size. And to get
that's crazy.
And wriggle through and clean something like this
You getting
seems practically impossible.
9 inch, dang. Wow, my son's not even 2 years old yet. And I don't even think that he would fit in there very well. Like, I mean, that's crazy. Wow.
Martin Glynn is president of the National Association of British Chimney Sweeps. So Martin, here's
the National Association of British Chimney Sweeps. I didn't even know that was a thing. All right, Martin, let's see what it's all about.
Of the National Association of British Chimney Sweeps. So Martin, here's a very old chimney right here, and this is the kind of thing those boys would have to clean. So tell us, how did they go about doing it?
Well, the little boys were known as climbing boys, apprenticed to the trade at 7 years old in some cases, and they used to use their elbows and knees to scamper up inside the chimney. And in many cases they stripped naked. Although they had some sort of early uniform, the soot used to fill the pockets, and because the chimney design was so small, they became wedged, so they used to strip.
I didn't know the chimneys were that elaborate.
Naked so they could escape back down the chimney after cleaning.
So what equipment did they have?
The little climbing boys, and in some cases girls, they used to use a small scraper, such as this, a little metal scraper with a wooden handle, and the traditional sweeps hand brush, which would literally, they would scrape the soot away and brush with the hand brush.
Dang.
The exploitation of climbing boys and girls was rightly seen at the time as a national scandal. However, even when new technology was introduced in the form of jointed chimney brushes and sweeps no longer needed children, it didn't mean that boys and girls were spared.
There was still a great reluctance for the master sweeps of the day to do away with boys, and it was far cheaper to purchase a small boy from a family for a guinea or two, a few shillings from the poorer families, and
purchase the child, they said. Is that what? Hold on. Is that he? Oh,
sweeps of the day to do away with boys, and it was far cheaper to purchase a small boy from a family for
wow.
a guinea or two, a few shillings from the poorer families, and in some cases little girls as well.
So boys and girls were cheaper than brushes.
Absolutely at the time.
Wow. You get a kid cheaper than a brush. Wow, guys, holy crap.
In one horrible incident in Dover in Kent, where a master had sent a boy up the chimney with a wet tarpaulin to extinguish a chimney fire.
A wet what?
A boy up the horrible incident in Dover in Kent, where a master had sent a boy up the chimney with a wet tarpaulin to extinguish a chimney fire.
A wet tarpaulin? Okay.
And apparently he climbed into the flue very reluctantly. The master threatened to beat him. He attempted to climb further into the chimney, became stuck in the chimney, wedged, and apparently they heard his screams for over 2 miles.
Dang.
Not exactly Chim Chimney Cheree Mary Poppins, is it now?
Chim chim cheree.
And it shows how hard life was and how few opportunities there were that many climbing boys quit the trade and went off to serve in the armed forces.
I would too, shit.
The scandal of boy soldiers is something today that we associate with the most callous regimes in the developing world. But putting boys into war zones was actually an old British tradition.
Old British tradition.
For example, there were 13 of them who fought at the Battle of Trafalgar.
And you know what? We're going to find out about that in the next one because this is going to be done in 2 parts, guys. I don't have a lot of time for this video. So, but that's awesome because, hey, now we can get 2 videos out of it. So, that was the first part of the children who built Victorian England, suggested by Bunny J. So shout out to him. Links to the original video down below. Hit like, hit subscribe on the way down, and I will catch you in the next one. You guys have a super fun, awesome day. Take care.